Well, hello, my baby gorillas, and I hope this is going through this time. Let's see. Are we on? Come on, are we on? Yes, we are. Thank God for that. Nothing like a screw up on the Guerilla TV channel. Love it. So here we are. SNP. Was I right or was I right? Yes. And they keep talking with George Galloway coming on with this. It was the Guerilla TV channel that blew this right out of the water from the actual us being at the court case. So the SNP, and I knew instinctively that there was something wrong about that, instinctively from a political point of view. So the SNP, this is Sky News and James Matthews, who covered the Count Dankula affair. Everybody, all the media outlets piled on to Alex Salmond, didn't give him any sort of fair hearing in the press prior to it. So a man can be accused of something, but the accusers can then stay masked. So you can then get absolute setups like we might have been seeing here for people making false sexual allegations. And I'll come on to the ramifications, the huge ramifications that people are going to have to get charged for this. The SNP faced fresh claims that high ranking party figures conspired conspired uh, with Kenny McCaskill. Um, McCaskill says senior party members shared dozens of messages about the former First Minister in a WhatsApp group. So I was right again. The WhatsApp groups is going to be potentially the key for this. So there was a conspiracy. Every person in the conspiracy needs to be charged with perverting the course of justice and abuse of a public office. So there's at least two charges that have to be brought. And obviously, I've just gone down and saw Lord Advocate James Wolfe to ask if he's going to step down because it looks like not only did he potentially was involved in orchestration, he was also involved in the preventing of the Parliament actually getting the legal advice that was given, obviously to cover this up. And not only with that, so he might be up for criminal charges as well. There's people in the police that might be up for criminal charges as well. I don't know who the specifics in the police are. People in the government officials, every one of the nine people who made the accusations will be up for perverting the course of justice charges. This is massive. Nicola Sturgeon will be up for abuse of public office. She'll have to resign. Sweeney will have to resign. And her husband will have to resign from her husband, the office in the SNP. And that's only potentially the start. So the orchestration of this is massive. Every one of the periodicals in Scotland all piled into Alex Salmond, covered up the rape allegations of the alleged rape allegations or sexual abuse allegations, or whatever it was. There was no rape involved. These were all alleged sexual assault allegations. Some of them were just spurious. A lot of people didn't want to take it forward. They were gerrymandered into this. So it's not just that she's going to have to resign. There might be actual charges, abuse of public office, that she's perverted the course of justice. I think there should be standalone charges where people lie to actually set somebody up, and they should be put in prison for actually deliberately conspiring to lie to actually set somebody up. This is massive. They're all gone. There has to be an immediate vote in whether John Sweeney it should be standing in that office. The Parliament has to vote on that. This is massive, massive, incredible things. The SNP could be finished as a political party, and everybody's jumping ship to the Scottish Libertarian Party. SNP MP Kenny McCaskill says senior party members shared dozens of messages about the former First Minister in the WhatsApp group. So they have to get these messages. Now we can't trust the police force. They were you saw how they were interfering with me while I was actually doing my job to report on the Alex Salmond trial, and also they have now we can't trust the judicial system because the Lord Advocate is now compromised in his position. He has to resign and he might be up in charges. Oh, this is unbelievable. Unbelievable. They have to be arrested. They will have to be arrested and they're held accountable and stand down from the public office. SNP MP Ken McCaskill says the senior party members shared dozens of messages about the former First Minister in a group WhatsApp group. That has to be taken as evidence. And every one of the 9 people who charged Alex Salmond have to now be charged. And their identities have to be released now that it looks like a conspiracy. So we have to now find out who conspired and what they were conspiring to do. The SNP is facing fresh claims that senior party figures conspired against its former leader Alex Salmond by Nicola Sturgeon and her husband. I mean, this is huge, huge news. Huge news. One of its own MPs have told Sky News this is an internal fight in the Labour Party. I thought it might have been the Unionists are out with. They targeted Alex Salmond, but this is internal because Nippy is a globalist shill. She's not pushed for nationalism, and she's destroyed the NHS. She will be the highest number of deaths from drug overdoses. She's destroyed the Scottish economy for the globalist New World Order. And obviously, Alex Salmond did a much better job as First Minister than she's done. She's finished. That's it. It's over. You might as well resign just now, Nicola. Not saying that you wouldn't resign. It's over. Your constituency, as Donald Trump said, looks like a shithole. You've got people making the people on the ground making allegations that rampant child rape is going on in your constituency and being overlooked by you. Oh, it's unbelievable! Unbelievable! Just give me a second. Good morning, son. I hope this is going through this time. Let's see. My friend Manny has not actually got to see this yet. So this is absolutely huge, huge news. I'll now actually look at the. Yes, we are. I'll now look at the things. Nothing like a screw up on the Guerilla TV channel. Love it. So here we are. SAP. Was I right or was I right? Yes. And the keep talking to George Galloway coming on with this. It was the Guerilla TV. Right. So this is it. Let me just stop this, and I'll be able to hopefully see the commentary. So that's me looking at the live chat, guys. So if you want to speak or say anything, I'll read it out, obviously. So, where are we? One of its own SNP. So this is a civil war within the SNP. Nicola Sturgeon's obviously the globalist shill, and she's covered up the abuses of the her office, and this is massive. This is criminal. This is not even just a resignation in office for lying to Parliament. This is a criminal matter where she has orchestrated false sexual allegations against Alex Salmond on the back of this Me Too movement. Believe all women. Well, we've now potentially seen one that's lied, not even lied, but orchestrated the setting up of false sexual allegations against her mentor in cohorts with the police, the judicial system, civil servants, and 9 people who have now need to be put up on perjury trial. Perjury trial. Hello, hi guys, hi there. How you doing, boys? So this is absolutely huge. One of its own MPs has told Sky News that high-ranking members of the party shared dozens of messages about the First Minister, the former First Minister, in social media group chat, calling themselves the Vietnam Group, a bunch of communists. In text exchanges before last year's criminal trial, Mr. Salmond, which resulted in his acquittal, it's claimed they discussed the reluctance of alleged victims to give evidence and efforts they could take to give her encouragement. Sorry, I'll just read that again. It's claimed they discussed the reluctance of alleged victims. That's why there has to be charges brought against these victims because of a reluctance. And then that'll open up the can of worms to find out who exactly was trying to apply the pressure. I think we'll find out who is actually trying to apply the pressure here anyway. Did they give her encouragement? The new claims are made by Kenny McCaskill, the SNP for East Lothian and Scotland's former First Justice Secretary. Scotland's former First Justice Secretary. He told Sky News that the content of the digital, communications, long been a subject of open discussion within SNP circles, and he had backed calls for Scotland's Crown Office to release the texts as written proof. So yeah, we need to find that. They can't be now. The SNP are trying to be a fire preventer where the fire's already out there, and they're trying to beat out all the different sources where this information could come out of. We already know it's already out in the public domain. You need to resign. It's embarrassing. You've embarrassed the country. Our unpublished message, Mr. McCaskill told Sky News that there was long-standing talk in SNP circles about WhatsApp and text messages, and I've been in correspondence with the Crown Office about it. There is WhatsApp group that was called Vietnam Group that include staffers and even government members of the government. So this orchestration could go on to the actual people who are employed as civil servants. Oh, I mean, how untrustworthy of the government are the government? As back calls, McCaskill has back calls for Scottish Crown Office to release the text messages. That's a given. That's now a given. You have to release the text messages now. That is exactly what has to happen. Referring to the trial of Alex Salmond, who was cleared of sexual assault charges, Mr. McCaskill said there is one text message between two senior members of staff seeking to put pressure on one of the alleged victims who was expressing reluctance about proceeding, and they discussed ways getting her back in the game. Oh my God, that's jail time for them. That's jail time for them. If that comes out and they've done that, they should be going to jail. Mr. Morell, Nicola Sturgeon's husband, there's been allegations that he's gay as well. Husband is now not coming back to the judicial inquiry or the parliamentary inquiry, and he's now seeking legal advice because the Parliament now want him up on lying to the Parliament. So perjury charges for Mr. Morell. He's not coming back and now seeking legal advice. Oh, the cat's right out of the bag here, guys. There is a lot to come out, and I think it's important that everyone. She's going to have to resign. She was on Andrew Marr saying she may or may not resign. She won't have a choice. She has to resign. There is nothing. She's embarrassing the country. I think it's important for everyone that we should have clarity. This is nothing to do with the witnesses and alleged victims. It's everything to do with internal SNP machinations. If you're one of the victims and you've made false allegations, you should be up on charges. Simple as that. It doesn't matter. I do agree. It is probably internally within the SNP that this is, and the civil servants, that this has been constructed. But if you're making false sexual allegations, you need to go to jail. Simple as that. Simple as that. You need to go to jail. False allegations, go to jail. There should be standalone crimes for making false sexual allegations. And all of these 9 people need to be charged now. The SM and polygraph tests. Polygraph tests need to be brought in so we find out who's telling the truth. The Sky News has been told that these Sky News has been told that those included in the Vietnam group are close friends of First Minister Nicola Sturgeon. Well, there is a surprise, but she wasn't a member, but orchestrating it allegedly. A group chat is a facility on social media that allows a number of individuals to create a digital discussion forum. The Vietnam moniker stemmed from Operation Dem, the name of the police investigation into Mr. Salmond. Well, I would suggest there needs to be an investigation into the police. I don't think the police investigating the police is the correct thing to do. We have to have somebody external who is actually doing this. Fresh claims, right? Okay, man, I'll come and look at that. Let me have a wee look at what he just said there. SNP fresh claims.
They were once big friends, they're now bigger enemies. Team Sturgeon versus Team Salmon is now a rift that runs deep through the SNP. He believes her party leadership conspired against him. Now, new allegations raise new questions. It centres on his criminal trial, at which he was acquitted of sexual assault, and text messages retrieved.
They definitely will wake people up. Pandora's box has been opened here. Yes, it has, mate. It's hard to watch what this woman has done to Scotland. Yes, and again, yes, that's correct, buddy. Hope this wakes people up. It's liking your new ties and Reborn Ed's background. Thank you very much. Thanks, Suzanne. Hi, bro. Hi, guys.
From the phones of SNP officials. They're not being released for now, but we've been told that in SNP circles, they're no secret.
There were WhatsApp and text messages aplenty.
Kenny McCaskill says the existence of a so-called Vietnam group was common knowledge in the party. The SNP MP told us it was senior party figures discussing progress towards the Salmon trial.
Well, it was a WhatsApp group that included SNP staff members and members within and working for the Scottish Government. I understand that the name is rather ironic. It apparently came about because the police operation against Alex Salmond was termed DM, which is obviously the Latin for day. But somebody seems to have misunderstood this as DM being a former president of the Vietnam.
At least one exchange in the run-up to the trial is said to have discussed putting pressure on an alleged victim who was reluctant to proceed.
They include one that was sent to another SNP staffer that was about putting pressure upon one of the alleged victims to, as I understand it, get her back in the game. That's
horrendous. That's orchestration of false sexual allegations. That's jail time.
I think it's important for all that these messages should be put out there for all to see.
A chat group is a digital discussion forum in which different individuals come together to chat as a group. We've been told that the members of the Vietnam group were close.
We need to find out who every one of these members was and whoever was in the civil service as well.
Close colleagues of Nicola Sturgeon. We've also been told that Scotland's First Minister was not a member of that group.
Good morning.
A Scottish Parliament inquiry has heard from her husband and chief executive of the SNP that he wasn't aware of any WhatsApp group. But Peter Murrell did send text messages that appear to encourage prosecution of Alex Salmond.
I can only just explain that as being how upset I was that morning.
But he said the texts weren't encouragement, they'd been misrepresented. The Scottish Parliament Inquiry Committee has asked for all digital communications connected to the Salmond affair. Scotland's Crown Office has said it will respond in early course. The SNP hasn't responded to our request for comment.
Well, James, before us this morning. James, how significant is this?
Very significant because of the content that we've revealed, but also because of the players in this saga. Two of the biggest figures in the political landscape up here, Alex Salmond and Nicola Sturgeon. These
question to what to do think will happen after this. I think Nicola Sturgeon's going to have to resign. I think John Sweeney will have to go. There should be prosecutions. I don't think there will be because we've got a flawed system. There should be prosecutions on this. If Nicola Sturgeon has orchestrated that and her minions underneath it have done this, then there should be criminal charges. The orchestration of false sexual allegations to destroy a man's life is horrendous, absolutely disgusting. And anybody who's involved in that and anybody who thought that shouldn't be holding public office, shouldn't be in the public sphere, and should be kicked out of office. I should be kicked out of the party. Never mind anything else. The SNP have to do internal housekeeping and kick Nicola Sturgeon, her husband, John Sweeney, and whoever else has been involved in that out of the party. It's absolutely disgusting. They setting up the orchestration of sexual allegations, lies based on this, and everybody needs to be charged. Everybody needs to. There should be some. I don't think there is, but there should be some conspiratorial thing that has 10 to 15 years in jail if you've conspired to falsely accuse somebody of sexual allegations. And the government-funded rape crisis centre wanted the no jury trial and just to be done by a judge, and that's government funded by the SNP, Nicola Sturgeon in turn. So they were trying to dismiss jury trials so that the men who could be falsely accused were only to be convicted by the judge and not by a jury, which looks like again like she was trying to set things up to destroy men's lives.
Text messages.
And if she is a lesbian, she seems like a misandrous lesbian.
WhatsApp chat group messages, they're being held by Scotland's Crown Office. Now, Alex Salmond, he has long argued and long held the belief that there was a conspiracy that gave traction to efforts to land him with a criminal prosecution for sexual assault, at which...
He's an older gentleman. He may actually come back into politics. He could actually retake over the SNP. Out of all the potential candidates, Alex Salmond would probably be the best. He was certainly one of the better First Ministers. Certainly a lot better than Nicola Sturgeon's been. She's been absolutely atrocious in domestic issues. And for those who want independence, she's not managed to pursue independence any further. If every SNP member joined the Scottish Libertarian Party, then the Conservatives would not have the ability to say that it was a once-in-a-lifetime generation thing. If they all joined the Scottish Libertarian Party, then they would not be able to say that the Conservatives would not be able to say that the Scottish Libertarian Party said it's a once-in-a-generation thing, and then they would be able to get a second referendum. That's the way to do it. If you want a second referendum on independence, just jump ship from the SNP to the Scottish Libertarian Party.
He was acquitted. These text messages, the substance of them, will provide evidence for that or against it. What we've done today is learn some of the content of some of the messages, and it's not necessarily a good look for the high command of the SNP. A WhatsApp group called the Vietnam Group.
It's not looking not good. This is criminal. This is not power corrupts. Yes, it does, but I mean this is criminal. This is them targeting a private man. Not only did they target a private man when Alex Salmond was out of politics, he was due to get a job with a major periodical group, and he was denied that because of these false sexual allegations. So there also has to be some sort of remuneration for Alex Salmond because from the government if the government is actually set him up with fake sexual allegations.
Which discussed, among other things, putting pressure or offering encouragement to a reluctant witness, an alleged victim who was reluctant to proceed towards that criminal trial.
So I would suggest she would be the first person to actually put pressure on. As soon as one breaks, they'll all start breaking, and especially if they're facing jail time for perjury, and this they have to, and we can't trust the government to actually put this into force. The Parliament now has to take charge and put independent committees into looking at the judiciary, the legal system, the SNP internally, the witnesses, the civil servants. Everything now needs to be covered by the Parliament, the non-SNP parts of the Parliament, or the SNP parts of the Parliament like Kenny McCaskill that's not been affected by this. And there has to be some way of actually holding this to account, this entity, this cabal that's made up across various things, the police, the legal services like Lord Wolf, the civil servants, the internal within the SNP, the government, and the actual underlying witnesses. all of them need to actually be investigated now. The whole shooting match needs to be investigated. If she's doing this to Salmon, what's she doing in Scotland? She's been a disaster in Scotland. She's been a disaster. She's too busy talking about trans rights, which affect a very small part of the community. And if she's gay, this probably means a lot to her. But in the greater scheme of things, it's not. She's already destroying through the lockdown, these draconian lockdown measures, which is not preventing the spread of the disease. Funnily enough, she's not preventing. She's destroying the Scottish economy. Time to clean house, yes. Time to clean house. The SNP have got a future. If this is not actually destroyed it, it's definitely time to clean. It's not even just time to clear house. It's time to hold people to account for their actions. It's not acceptable if they've orchestrated this through various different individuals. Everybody has to be held to account.
It does raise questions about what else is in these text messages and who else might have been involved in the discussions. My understanding is that it certainly involved the High Command, people in the immediate vicinity of Nicola Sturgeon.
And every one of them is liable, every one of potential criminal charges, and they should step down from office. They're not fit to hold public office if they've been involved in the orchestration of false sexual allegations. They're not fit to hold public office. Time to drain the swamp. Exactly, buddy. That's exactly right.
Although she was not a member of the Vietnam chat group, but there will be questions about who knew about those discussions and who.
It must have come. We all know it must have come from Nicola Sturgeon anyway. I mean, and Alex Salmond's already, we'll come on to that. But Alex Salmond's already alluded why it must come from Nicola Sturgeon.
Who partook in that kind of activity. We've had reaction this morning from Alex Cole-Hamilton. He's a Liberal Democrat MSP. He's a member of the Scottish Parliament's inquiry into harassment complaints, an inquiry into the way it was handled, complaints against Alex Salmond. He's given this reaction to this story today. He says, if true, this suggests that senior forces within the ruling party may have used the complaints of vulnerable women as political capital. He says the suggestion they may have even pressurised a potential victim for their own ends is unforgivable. Alex Cole-Hamilton of the Lib Dems.
Everybody needs to be up in charges. I was a normal person, they would be in jail. Yeah, if that was a normal person, yeah. Especially if I didn't have your back as well. We had 14 years of the SNP and our beautiful country's a mess. We need a change now, yes. I totally agree. Things will be changing, don't worry. There is things in the pipeline. Okay, let's go back to this then.
Unforgivable. Alex Cole-Hamilton of the Lib Dems.
Everybody needs to be up. So I think we've just pretty much covered that. Its investigation committee has demanded that the Crown Office release records of text messages along with other documents, and has taken the unprecedented step of using legal powers under the Scotland Act to do so. The committee members have asked for text and WhatsApp communications between Susan Ruddock, the chief. She'll need to be investigated. She could be up in charges. Police officer, operations officer of the Scottish National Party, and members of the Scottish Government. They'll need to be up in potentially charges and resign. And civil servants and special advisors, they'll need to be up in potential charges and potentially resign. Kenny McCaskill has previously obtained 2 messages sent by Peter Morrell. He's up for potential perjury to the committee, and could be up for charges in perverting the course of justice. He's already on the WhatsApp. He's already admitted in the Parliament that he sent messages so that he would pressurise Alex Salmond by drumming up cases in England and London, which didn't have actually any underlying victim there. And that's what so on the WhatsApp, he's already said that his bank tonight's in it. So he's already orchestrated this. Has anyone spoke to the alleged victims about this? The alleged victims are covered because of the requirement to not allow the victims. The victims they've all been found not guilty. Alex Salmond's been found not guilty of all 9 of these charges. So the victims are now protected with their names retracted. And what has to happen now is charges have to go against these victims, and actually for them to actually then stand trial, so we can unretract the names and we find out who these alleged victims actually are, and if these are orchestrated civil servants. Remember, I've told you all this before. If you, I mean, a lot of you guys are heavy Guerilla TV channel devotees, and you guys know I've told you this before. I've been on the money. I've told you before anybody else said it. I was away back at the trial, and everything I've said has been absolutely on the money. Even George Robertson watches the Guerilla TV channel to get it. Won't this evidence change that? Yes, it may change that. Has anyone spoke to Elijah? No, no, because they're still protected by law with their names redacted. The only way that their names are not going to be redacted is if they are prosecuted, and then we get to find out who they are. And they should all be charged with perverting the course of justice. And then we find out who they are to see where the orchestration has come up, where if these are all civil servants and they've been pressurised. Some of them have already said they're pressurised. They're going to feel like even more pressure if they're charged now with perverting the course of justice and could face up to 5 years in jail. Or perjury. Perjury and perverting the course of justice. And these two may be going to jail for perverting the course of justice. I don't know if there's an orchestration of false allegations, perjury, abuse of the office of power, the government, abuse of power in the government. So they could be facing, both of those two guys could be facing multiple years in jail for what they've done. Not forget the resigning. The resigning will be a matter of course. All should be jailed. Yes, every one of them should be jailed for actually their part in this. This is absolutely scandalous. Both of these were sent to Miss Ruddock on the day and Mr. Salmon's final court appearance on January 2019. The first one read, totally agree folk should be asking the police questions. Report now with the PF on charges which leaves police twiddling their thumbs. So good time to be pressurising them. Would be good to know Met looking at events in London. Now, Murdo Fraser has already cross-examined Mr. Morell about these messages, and Mr. Morell said there was no underlying victim. So there was no person that was actually, so he's trying to drum up fake charges in London with no actual underlying victim. The second message appears to refer to the court prosecution service in London, read TBH, the more fronts he is having to firefight on, the better for all complainers. So CPS actions would be a good thing. So they're actually trying to get more fake allegations piled in from London and everywhere else to actually destroy Alex Salmon's reputation and Alex Salmon's name by making false sexual allegations. The Metropolitan Police in London received one complaint in connection with Alex Salmon's investigation in January, but dropped its inquiries after contacting the complainant as part of its case review. That person now we should find out who that person is. That person should be up on potentially fake allegations, perverting the course of justice, and we need to find out who the person was in London and what connection that was to Morell. Did Morell actually go to the person and for them to stimulate the allegation? So that person has to be up and pervert the course of justice, and we have to then take them to court. Mr. Morell addresses the communications in a written submission to the harassment inquiry, stating the messages have been presented in a way that suggests a meaning that they do not have in reality. My intention was to advise that their questions should be addressed to the police and not the SNP. Why are they going to the SNP if it's not orchestrated? Who is the Met? Does Sturgeon have a relationship? The Met is the Metropolitan Police in London. So they were trying to orchestrate. Morell, who's Nicola Sturgeon's husband, was trying to get allegations down in London so that Alex Salmon would have to fight down in London and also in Scotland with these 9 complainers, who some of them didn't even want to come forward. They suggest a meaning that they do not, the messages have been presented in a way that suggests a meaning that they do not in reality have. My intention was to advise that their questions should be addressed by the police, not the SNP. In his oral evidence to the inquiry, Mr. Morell was asked if there were any more text messages to. This is where his perjury comes in, because he said there was no other text messages, and that's obviously lying to the Parliament, which he was under oath not to lie to the Parliament. So he's now refused to come back to the Parliament and got in contact with a lawyer because he was obviously lying. In the oral evidence to the inquiry, Mr. Morell was asked if there was any more text messages to any other party officials on this same subject. Under oath, he replied, "No, not that I'm aware of." And Miss Sturgeon was asked, so Nicola Sturgeon didn't remember meetings with Alex Salmond. I think it was the 30th of March. He doesn't remember. So I mean, it's all just lies, basically, isn't it? Unless they both get bad memories. I've got a bad memory, so I may not remember things. But Nicola Sturgeon's a lawyer, so she's obviously got a great memory. I'm be very surprised if she didn't remember when these allegations were coming out. And it looks like she set the whole thing up. Miss Sturgeon was asked on BBC Andrew Marr programme if it was true that there was no other text messages of that nature. Miss Sturgeon replied, "There are no messages that are relevant to this committee." So again, we already now know Kenny McCaskill has now come up and said there was actually a groups of messages that were relevant to this. The committee is the parliamentary committee that's investigating Nicola Sturgeon and her husband, and obviously the bigger ramifications. So they now have to expand the committee to looking into the police, the civil servants, the SNP, the government, the actual complainants now. All of these now have to be taken into consideration with and criminal matters have to, or criminal charges have to be brought forward to everybody who's involved in this, and also the resignation of all these people, including Lord Advocate James Wolfe, for not giving the legal documentation to the actual Parliament and the Parliamentary Committee, the covering up of all these things. I'm going to come on to what's happening just now in a minute. So, a spokesman for the Crown Office told the Sky News COPFS has received correspondence from the committee requesting material and will respond in early course, adding that it must consider where producing documents sought would be contrary to the public interest. Well, none of it's all in the public interest now. This is now a public matter, and it's all in the public interest. So we, the public, want to know. We want to see every one of these documents in the now. And it's not the Crown Office is Mr. Wolfe. So I was down at the Crown Office asking if he was going to resign his position, because his position is now untenable from the hate speech bill to this. His position in Scottish law is now a resignation matter, and it might be a criminal matter if he is committed, if he's worked in conjunction with Nicola Sturgeon and Mr. Morell in the perverting of the course of justice, which is a horrendous thing to think. The Lord Advocate, who is meant to be the law in the land, would have actually been part of. So he's going to have to go. Sky News has contacted the SNP and its chief executive, Mr. Morell, to ask for comments. And as you can imagine, they have said Nanti. The committee, what about the wife and husband committee? Yes. Well, the wife and husband are getting investigated by the committee. Who is the so they're getting investigated by the committee, but the committee now has to. The committee now has to expand into various remits. Has to expand into various different things. It now has to investigate the civil service, the judiciary, the police, the underlying complainants, the government. All of this now has to be taken into consideration by a beefed up committee now. So let's say, this guy's brilliant. I think his name's Bert. He's a nice guy. We've got a problem. He does some great podcasts, great guy, lovely fella from London. So he covered it, and I think the other friends in London didn't really get it at first, because obviously they're a bit remote, and it's easier if you're down in a vicinity or a location to actually see what's actually happening. So Bert covered this before, and he's done a great, brilliant. Subscribe to it. We've got a problem. His channel is. Subscribe to him. He does some great stuff on YouTube.
Well, guys, some of you might remember
And he's now talking about, obviously, what I've just talked about.
my video the other day relating to Nicola Sturgeon's House of Lies that's about to come crashing down on her head, or at least we hope it will. It would appear that storm is now about to hit in relation to Sturgeon, her husband, and a fair few others, not only in the SNP up in Scotland, but down here in London, along with those in the media. Well, obviously, the media won't suffer from it, but believe me, they are involved, by proxy at least. As a matter of fact, the BBC have been named themselves, along with Westminster MPs for Scotland, and of course many in Scotland itself, like I just said. Now, there are still names that have been hidden for legal reasons, so I can't even speculate on them, but all this is in relation to the Alex Salmond case.
So, can you imagine your name, if you've lied about a sexual assault, that you are now able to be protected by law, and you can't get the actual police to investigate or bring charges against the person who's lied about your sexual assault. So not only are you getting protected by lying about the sexual assault, you're not even getting the police to investigate the person who lied about the sexual assault. That's how perverse. And not only that, the Rape Crisis Centre are wanting to not have jury trials so that it was only a judge. So you can see the political gerrymandering of sex by Nicola, who is obviously an alleged lesbian.
Or political witch hunt, as it seems to be, orchestrated possibly from the very top down, with even the Crown Office being accused of playing a part.
I'm going to pull the whole thing down. I'm going to bring the whole fucking diseased, corrupt temple down on your head. It's got to be biblical.
Now, the accusations we are going to go through are not coming from a union supporter, Tory MP, or even Labour. They are coming from a die-hard independent supporter, Craig Murray, who actually tried to become an SNP politician before now. He has also been a British ambassador, among many other things, so has many contacts in politics, as you would hear. That makes what he says, at least, credible. Now, this has all come about because he's been dragged into court for contempt of said court in relation to reporting on the...
So it's okay for Mr. Murray, who is internally an SNP supporter, to be dragged up for... let me just go back and see what Bert said here.
Now, this has all come about because he's been dragged into court for contempt of said court in
contempt of court. So, I mean, so they are now dragging in people who are whistleblowing on the government and bringing them in with our allegedly compromised Lord Advocate.
Relation to reporting on the Salmond trial. But if what he says is true, it is more likely an attempt to shut him up rather than convict him of an actual crime he has committed. If anything, the BBC should be up in court alongside him.
Well, I was challenging Kirsty Wark as she was outside. The BBC should be privatised. I've said that before. We're all starting to wake up to how duplicitous and anti-British the BBC is. They've really become a cancer. Bert, I'm going to use a bit of this. I hope you don't mind. Hope you don't charge me a copyright strikes, buddy. I'll use only parts of your stuff in future, but I'm going to use quite a lot of this because you're on the money here, buddy.
Since their documentary on the trial apparently gave away details that are...
Yeah, so they've got one rule for them, one for another. One rule for thee, another for me.
Still protected under law. Obviously, the whole situation has a really bad...
There has to be an overhaul of our judicial system, the way the judicial system works, and what our judicial system looks into. It's obviously become corrupt.
...smell about it that us plebs usually do not catch a whiff of. I mean, how often is top government corruption this out in the open as a sworn legal statement used as evidence in open court? Maybe
a sworn legal statement is used in evidence in court.
This is...
I'll come on to my sworn evidence by Mr. Murray as well. Seems like an honourable man.
What George Galloway was referring to when I covered him talking about a critical mass of shitstorms coming down on Sturgeon's head the other day.
Let's see what Georgie Porgy says, my pal Georgie. He loves me. George, I love George. Although I would destroy George on economics, that would be George's weakness. I already know that's George's weakness. I agree with a lot of what Georgie said. I watch him. He's very entertaining. It would be good if he wasn't so serious. I think a few jokes, George, lighten the mood slightly. But yeah, he makes a lot of sense. He does say a lot of things. It wouldn't be good for Scotland in different ways because of the economics. I'm not sure George understands economics very well, or starting of businesses, but he's on point with a lot of other things, and I agree with George on a lot of things, and I like him as a person as well, although he's a bit serious. And he's correct in what he says. Well, I think tries to protect those who are vulnerable and who are getting abused by the state as well. I think he may be a libertarian socialist.
Things are about to change.
Oh yes, George, you've said it, buddy. Things are definitely about to change.
I know things that I can't say here now because of the, what could I call them? Flurry would be an understatement.
So the SNP are now trying to cover their tracks and actually go on the offensive. But the walls are coming in. I told you this months ago. People were saying, oh, why are you saying that? You're talking rubbish. Oh, yeah. And then they found out I wasn't talking rubbish and I was completely correct.
Because of the thicket of legal moves that have been made by SNP leaders to protect themselves from honest, straight reporting of the true facts. The truth is coming out. And this coming week, there will be a dramatic event.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a few dramatic events and maybe even a few arrests as well. If people are committed perjury in this orchestration of setting up of false sexual allegations, false charges. I don't know what the legal implications of being able to do that. I don't know if there should be actual charges for that, the orchestration of false charges. So you've got the liar who lies about the charge, and then you've got the person who orchestrates the liar to actually destroy the third party or get them put in jail or whatever. That's criminal. Those two are criminal in separate ways.
Which may bring the house down for the morals.
It could be bigger for the SNP. I mean, the SNP are going to have to massively rebuild off the back of this.
For the First Minister of Scotland, who didn't look too cocky today, if I may say so, on the Andrew Marr show on BBC.
Yeah, she was still not saying she was going to resign. She won't have a choice. When this comes out, she may have to go to jail.
He won this very morning. The scandal that is governance in Scotland on any number of issues and crises. This is an omni-shambles.
I know, he's such a great orator, isn't he? I know, omni-shambles. What a great expression, George. That's absolutely fantastic. Yeah, is that an omni-shambles, whatever that is, but it's great. I don't know what that is. Is that made up, man? Sissy used to make up words. I think that may be a George Galloway made up omni-shambles. But he is correct.
In Scotland, we have reached critical mass of...
So it's all coming out, basically. Every bit of the evidence is now coming out. More and more pressure. The walls are going to come in. All of the other political parties are now going to be calling on Nicola Sturgeon to resign our position. There'll be a vote of no confidence in Sweeney as well. There'll be resignations in the civil service and the judiciary and potentially the police force, and the other people may be up on perverting the course of justice.
Scandals and crises. And the biggest scandal of them all is the Sturgeon-Salmond affair. They have defended themselves successfully so far by a variety of dubious legal moves.
Well, if you've got the Lord Advocate in your pocket, then that's pretty easy, isn't it?
But that's about to change.
Woof! So let's go back to Bert.
I'm inclined to believe that it is. Now, I won't be reading through all of it, but a fair amount of it, so this could well take a while. First off, it starts talking about the trial or the lead up to it after the allegations were made and became public knowledge. It says, in August of 2018, I read the salacious account.
I'm going to go right through all of that in a minute, so it may be prolonged. This is 30 minutes in itself, but I'm going to go right through that after this.
Published by the Daily Record of an alleged sexual assault by Alex Salmond on a civil servant in Butte House. Aspects of the story appeared to me highly unlikely, in particular the willingness of the civil servant to simply obey his instructions of going to the bedroom and laying on the bed. On August 2018, I therefore published an article on my blog expressing this opinion. I made no attempt to discover the identity of the civil servant involved, but I did make strenuous efforts
I think we need to know who the civil servants are. I think the anonymity thing has to be reviewed, and we have to now know who the people are that are making the charges.
Discover who had leaked the story to the media, calling a meeting with a wide range of contacts in Edinburgh and Glasgow. To my surprise, I discovered with a high degree of certainty that the leaker was Liz Lloyd, Chief of Staff to Nicola Sturgeon.
She'll have to be up in investigations as well then. That's two women that are orchestrating fake sexual allegations allegedly against Alex Salmond. It's funny how I've seen this before in my life, that women are able to make fake sexual allegations and get away with it, and no repercussions for the people who are orchestrating it, no repercussions for the person that's made it. So and they're being protected, and then there's all sorts of other things that are happening. So people need to go to jail for making fake sexual allegations, and for her orchestrating it, she needs to go to jail. She certainly needs to lose her job as well.
Also discovered that she had a personal history with the journalist concerned and did not link it, in my mind, to anything wider than that. So
she's basically orchestrating these fake sexual allegations.
There it is, guys, the first link for Nicola Sturgeon, or at least her office. Chief of Staff leaking stories about your mentor is not a good look, even less so when it's a journalist she has personal history with. He goes on, though, in January 2019, I published an article following Mr. Salmond's resounding victory in his judicial review case against the Scottish Government.
So Salmond's won basically everything. He's won, he beat all the 9 accusers, won his judicial review, and it looks like he'll take down Nicola Sturgeon for making fake sexual allegations, orchestrating the fake sexual allegations.
My article focused on the abuse of civil service procedure in the pursuit of Alex Salmond by
they need to be held accountable. Civil service need to be investigated. People need to be sacked from the civil service.
Leslie Evans and Judith McKinnon, and called for them to both be sacked. So there we have the permanent secretary.
I'll go down and actually see that as well. Judith McKinnon.
In the pursuit of Alex Salmond by Leslie Evans and Judith McKinnon, and called for them to both be sacked. So there we have the permanent secretary to the Scottish Government implicated in abuse of procedure with Judith McKinnon, a civil servant who was the investigating officer in the Salmond case, despite having McKinnon, and called for them following Mr. Salmond's resounding victory in his judicial review case against the Scottish Government. My article focused on the abuse of civil service procedure in the pursuit of Alex Salmond by Leslie Evans and Judith McKinnon, and called...
So Leslie Evans and Judith McKinnon have both should resign and have broken the impartiality in the civil service.
For them to both be sacked. So there we have the permanent secretary to the Scottish Government implicated.
So the permanent secretary to the Scottish Government, obviously female, is part of this.
In abuse of procedure with Judith McKinnon, a civil servant who was the investigating officer in the Salmond.
So the investigating officer and the whatever that was, what did they say there?
To both be sacked. So there we have the permanent secretary to the Scottish Government.
Permanent secretary to the Scottish Government and the investigations officer. So the people who are investigating it and the people who are connected to the government, Nicola Sturgeon, are both working in cahoots.
Government implicated in abuse of procedure with Judith McKinnon, a civil servant who was the investigating officer in the Salmond case, despite having prior contact with the complainants. Not too fishy, that is it? It goes on, though. The article concluded that if Nicola Sturgeon failed to act against them, it might indicate that she herself was involved in the campaign of false allegations against Alex Salmond. As a result of this article, Alex Salmond, with whom I had only had very slight prior acquaintance, invited me to meet him in the George Hotel in Edinburgh. Here, for the first time, he told me that Nicola Sturgeon had been behind the process designed to generate false accusations against him. He said,
"Oh, yes, Salmond thinks that as well." Now, I've never met Alex Salmond, and I've never met anybody or spoke to. Well, there's one person I know that's in the SNP, but I've not had any sort of major insights into the SNP from anybody. I've got an incredible political sense, and I'm able to work out what's going on.
As well as McKinnon and Evans, Liz Lloyd was responsible for the actual orchestration. Mr. Salmond further said that
Liz Lloyd, so there's another person that needs to resign and be investigated for perverting the course of justice.
The Scottish Government had made every effort to withhold vital evidence from Lord Pentland, who had ordered a process of commission and evidence on the available documentation. It was on the day that witnesses from Nicola Sturgeon's private office were due to give evidence as to her own knowledge and involvement that the Scottish Government suddenly conceded the case rather than have this evidence heard. So there we have Salmond directly implicating Nicola Sturgeon and those around her we have already mentioned. We also have the allegation of
females. I would wonder if these are feminists. The feminists that think that it's okay to make false sexual allegations. I wonder if they're lesbians as well. So I wonder if they're intersexual lesbian feminists who are in these high positions who think it's acceptable to make false sexual allegations against men.
Vital evidence was intentionally withheld from the judges in this judicial review that cost the taxpayer a lot of...
the Lord Advocate holding back vital evidence. Let's hear what Bert said there.
We have Salmond directly implicating Nicola Sturgeon and those around her we have already mentioned. We also have the allegation that vital evidence was intentionally withheld from the judges in this judicial review that cost...
So it sounds like the vital evidence was withheld from the judges by the civil servants. So there has to be an investigation into the civil servants.
The taxpayer a lot of money when they suddenly conceded it, possibly because fighting it would implicate people in this complete shit show and bring it out into the wild long ago. Craig Murray goes on though. Mr. Salmond further told me that there was a massive police operation underway to try and get the accusers to come forward against him.
So that to me means there has to be an investigation into the police. That's abuse of police power.
Was going to ludicrous lengths. He showed me an email
from... saw the police interfering with me when I was asking questions on the Guerilla TV channel. So you saw that there was something behind that. When I asked the police officer who was it that was orchestrating this, she wouldn't tell us.
One woman to him in which she stated that she had been called in and interviewed by the police because many years ago Alex Salmond had been said by another person to have been seen kissing her on the cheeks in a theatre foyer.
I mean, really,
the woman stated...
that's not sexual assault. I mean, that means every woman that's been kissed on the cheek has been sexually assaulted. That's absolutely ridiculous.
She had told them it was a perfectly normal greeting, as you would. She wished to warn Alex of the police fishing expedition against him. He understood that over 400 people had been interviewed by the police. He said those interviewed by the police had included all of the personal protection officers he has had as First Minister. They had all said they had seen him do nothing wrong and they were watching him very closely, as was their job. At least one of these policemen, now retired, had been given a rundown of the evidence by a policeman sent to interview him. The retired officer challenged the interviewer as to how he could be involved in such a corrupt stitch-up. He stated that the fact it was a stitch-up was evidenced by the fact that all the accusations emanated from the same small coterie. There was not a single accusation from an outside or independent source.
So this looks like a cabal who have coordinated this and now will have to be put up on charges. They now have to be charged with perverting the course of justice.
Fucking wow. Even police officers, it seems, are neck deep involved in this. Because if this is a targeted action to take down Salmond based on bullshit, the coppers would have smelt it from a mile off and put a stop to it had they not been involved. It is certainly eyebrow-raising, if you ask me.
So the Bert's right, and there has to be an investigation in the police. Now, the police investigating the police, to me, is not the most efficient thing. There has to be some way of external investigations into the police by somebody external.
The fact that a retired one apparently called out the interviewing copper also shows, if true, this is some top-tier corruption and unrivaled shit-weasel behaviour from a whole bunch of people and even institutions. I mean, not really surprising that it happens, but surprising it's all being aired in public, I think you would agree. Now let's move on to some of the juicy bits that we have coming up. Unfortunately, lots has been redacted under court orders to hide people's identities or cover their asses a little bit longer. It could well be both. Craig Murray states here, I had never in 40 years heard a hint of gossip surrounding Alex Salmond and sexual behaviour, with the single exception of a rumour
nobody said anything about Alex Salmond's sexual behaviour.
with romantic attachment that has been redacted, an attachment with redacted, so we don't know what that actually...
Maybe had some sort of romantic fling with somebody who was consensual and who was allegedly chasing him. Which I'm not really interested in. That's not really the same as orchestrating false sexual allegations, which is horrific.
Sentences there, they've taken quite a bit of it out. It says, but that had not involved any rumour of unwanted advances by Mr. Salmond, quite the opposite. It was rather widely believed in nationalist circles that she had set her cap at him. The common joke was that redacted was a booby prize. It had been impossible to follow the judicial review case without concluding that a very unfair process had been undertaken against Alex Salmond, and that it was impossible this could have happened without the knowledge and approval of Nicola Sturgeon. That was a shocking realisation to an independent supporter like myself. But what Alex Salmond was now telling me went further, which was that Nicola Sturgeon was involved in the orchestration of fake complaints against him. This was fairly astonishing on first hearing. Yeah, I imagine it would, but always remember she is a politician. I asked him what the motive could be. Alex replied that he did not know. Perhaps it lay in King Lear. He said that he had genuinely intended to quit politics and had lined up a position as chairman of Johnston Press, which had fallen because of these allegations.
So Nicola's basically destroyed the guy's reputation and then destroyed his ability to go into work, which he then has to be financially compensated for. It's not acceptable for Nicola to have orchestrated this. So obviously Alex Salmond, which she is a big enough political entity. All other political non-entities that are potentially lining up to take over from Nicola Sturgeon would probably lose to Alex Salmond if Alex Salmond got back in the SNP and stood again, because Alex Salmond is a much bigger political entity than Nicola Sturgeon, and she's rubbish.
But he had retired from the party leadership before and then came back, and perhaps Nicola had concluded he needed a stake through the heart. He had made...
So the motivation was to destroy Alex Salmond so he doesn't come back into politics to take her on, because she's a wee globalist shill.
Explained to her that he was not happy with her lack of progress towards an independence referendum following the Brexit vote. So there we have certainly a possible motive for Nicola Sturgeon to be doing this, or at least involved. It goes on, Alex Salmond was plainly very unhappy. He said that he believed that Nicola was banking on his loyalty to the SNP and to the independence movement, thinking that he would not split the party by revealing what or who was behind the allegations against him.
If somebody was making allegations against me, I would definitely be doing exactly what Alex has done. It's absolutely disgraceful abuse of power by Nicola Sturgeon, who's been a terrible First Minister for our country on domestic issues.
It's crucial time, as Salmond Sturgeon...
I think we'll go with this. Let's go and see Fat Andy. Fat Andy, who's too scared to debate me. Andrew Neil. Destroys her here.
On December the 12th, voters
respect the right of the people of Scotland to choose their own future, because and I do want to see an option for the whole UK to escape Brexit, but of course if there is another EU referendum of the people of Scotland to choose their own future, we're talking
so you don't have bargaining power, you have to go along with it.
That's not true, because I'm probably the most in this position. He's got big ambitions. I agree with some of what he's...
But I'm a minority Labour government. I can't deliver what you want on Trident. I really can't deliver a Scottish referendum again before 2021. You would bring him down? You wouldn't support him? I mean, we know what last time. But if we do stay in the EU, against the odds perhaps, if we do, you've lost your material change. You're on the opinion polls. The other one might not be with a second Brexit referendum. You say, I'll just come up with some more reasons for a second referendum.
It shouldn't be dictated to us, please. But, if we're in a position of Scotland being taken to the Commission, and then you have said...
Talking about England, the rest of the UK...
...own currency, which we've said...
That if you use the
greatest
pound...
respect and the accession, if Scotland... We are in charge of the decisions is reducing. The last time I think you and I had a discussion...
How do you build up currency reserve if you're running both
just at a faster rate than the growth...
The Institute for Fiscal Studies says of this plan that it implies at least another decade of the sort of restraint on public spending that Scotland is currently experiencing. If current policy is austerity would continue.
Scotland wouldn't have suffered the austerity cuts to our budget that we have. But I'm saying that if you apply those figures to the last 10 years, actually that increased Ireland's prosperity.
We're now talking about on the basis we leave.
That there's, that's passport, the impact of that on applications, and we have to set out clearly. And the lack of clarity and the lack
of parties. The fact is that the deal you could have eventually, but you accept that you can't join the EU with
their annual report on performance. But it's 1.8 million. We have challenges in Scotland,
but you cut drug treatment budgets by 15 million. And Edinburgh Hospital should have opened in 2012. And targets being hit.
Of the performance of health services in other parts of the UK.
Well, do you think it's a comfort to someone in Glasgow that they're not having to wait as long for somebody in Grimsby?
No, I don't. What I'm saying, I regularly get challenged by Conservatives and Labour in the Scottish Parliament saying if only we were in power, it would be so much better. I don't think it's unreasonable to say, yes, we have challenges in Scotland, but we are dealing with these challenges more effectively than these other parts of the UK.
Only 2 of your 8 waiting time targets being hit. You've been in for a long while. You haven't hit the A&E target since 2017. The 2-month cancer target you haven't hit since 2013. Children are dying in a new Glasgow hospital because the water's contaminated, perhaps by pigeon droppings. A new multi-million-pound Edinburgh hospital should have opened in 2012 is still unfit to open. You can't even get the ventilation system to work. You've got the worst drug addiction problem in Europe, but you cut drug treatment budgets by 15 million. You clung on to your last health minister. You're under pressure now to sack a successor. I mean, you've called for legislation to protect the NHS from Donald Trump. Maybe the NHS needs legislation to protect it from Nicola Sturgeon.
Yeah, she's been a disaster, an absolute disaster. Brilliant by Andrew. He's too scared to talk to me.
Split could derail the chance for independence and have a truly historic effect. I asked him directly whether this meant he did not want me to publish this information at the moment. He confirmed I should not publish. This conversation was in confidence, but as my blog was highly influential within the independence movement, he thought it vital that I know the truth as matters develop. I told him that Sturgeon's hostility towards him seemed to be long-standing. I recounted a story I had been told by Robert McAlpine of an occasion shortly after his resignation when Alex Salmond had arrived at the Scottish Parliament for a function and the First Minister's office had refused to sign him in. Alex replied that this was true. It was particularly
vindictive that Nicola Sturgeon, after Alex Salmond raising money, I'd invite Alex Salmond in, or any other First Ministers, she wouldn't even let him in. How vindictive and petty, especially for a man who actually put you in the position you're in.
Particularly embarrassing as the occasion had been to hand over a large cheque for funds raised for charity following a campaign he had initiated as First Minister. They had been forced to do the photo shoot in the rain outside instead. The meeting concluded with Alex making the observation that he blamed himself for having established far too centralised a system of power in the Scottish Government and the SNP, and not taking account of how far that was open to abuse by a person of ill will. So he admits the way the SNP is set up in Scotland and the actual government up there means those at the top can abuse their power to make personal or political gains, which is apparently what is happening here. It is rather incredible that it's now backfired on him, as he said he blamed himself for creating the power system there that has shit all over his parade. Funny how that happens, ain't it? But I would say this is not looking good for Nicola Sturgeon and the snivelling shitweasels around her. You guys will have to let me know what you think in the comments. There's still plenty more to go. Now, let's get into some details about the actual stitch-up. In June 2019, I met with a person well known in the independence movement who informed me that had been present at a meeting with Nicola Sturgeon and key members of her inner circle, including ministers, which had gamed the possible outcome of the Salmond affair. My source was a trusted Sturgeon loyalist. The view of the meeting was that if Alex Salmond could be convicted on just a single count, he would be destroyed politically forever.
That's absolutely disgusting. Absolutely vile, the fact that they're actually making these false sexual allegations to destroy Alex Salmond.
Which was explicitly the objective. He would be on the register of sex offenders and branded a rapist in the public's mind, even if the actual offence convicted was just neat.
That's absolutely disgusting. There should be standalone counts. People should go to jail for 7 to 15 years for doing this, for the orchestration and for false allegations. 7 to 15 years.
Touching. I was also told that law officers were confident of a conviction for something, which is why the multiplicity of charges. They apparently advised that,
So
faced with
that's
a
all throwing enough shit at the wall, something's going to stick.
whole raft of charges, juries tend to compromise in the jury room to reach an agreement and convict on a lower charge. So literally...
And credit to the jury. Some people were saying, oh, that the jury, because the jury didn't convict him, that was the problem with our jury system. The jury didn't convict him, and I was there because he shouldn't have been convicted. And that was credit to our jury system in Scotland, which has definitely stood its test of time in this event.
Corruption.
Congratulations to all the jurors on the case.
And there, if that is true, no other way to sugarcoat around that one. He goes on now. What struck me both at the time and still was that it was impossible to understand the account as given without it involving corrupt collusion between Nicola Sturgeon's ministers, aides and the Crown Office over the handling of the salmon case and the...
All of those need to be investigated. The ministers, the aides, the Crown Office, all of it needs to be investigated now.
Charges being brought. I directly asked my source why they had been regarded as so trustworthy as to be included in such a meeting. They replied that they were generally highly supportive of Nicola and her leadership and had been on the fringes of her inner circle for a while, but they were not happy with the fitting up of Alex Salmond, which they described as unnecessary.
Well, at least someday about morals, I would definitely think that these people should be not charged if they think that was...
It's certainly one way to put it. But if true, this information comes directly from Nicola Sturgeon's inner circle. Even if remotely true, this should be more than enough to bring down Kim Jong-Sturgeon. Of course, the corruption runs pretty deep up there if any of this is true, so that's not guaranteed at this point. Now we're going to get into a little bit more here about Sturgeon and the SNP holding on to things to use at a later date against Alex Salmond. Perfectly normal behaviour, I'm sure you would all agree. Craig Murray goes on, in March 2020 I had explained and briefly shown to me by a source with good access to the content of evidence related to the Salmond trial, much of which was to be excluded from the trial itself by the judge as collateral. This material included the messages from Peter Murrell, Chief Executive Officer of the SNP, to Sue Riddick, Chief Operating Officer, to the effect that it was now the right time to put pressure on Police Scotland to move forward against Alex Salmond. It included the message from...
Well, that's him not only just orchestrated with the Met Police down in London, the Metropolitan Police down in London, but he's now also trying to put pressure on the Scottish Police, which I don't think is the role of the chairman of the SNP, to put pressure on the Scottish Police to investigate fake sexual allegations. Perjury is up for, and I would say was perverting the course of justice as well.
Miss Riddick, I do not recall the recipient to the effect that the problem was with the Police Scotland refusing to detail precisely what evidence they required. If they would specify, then she could get the evidence for them. It included the message from Leslie Evans, Permanent Secretary to the Scottish Government, after the Scottish Government had abandoned its judicial review case to the effect that they had lost a battle but won the war. It included the message from Redacted to another complainer to the effect that she had a plan that would enable them to have a strongly detrimental effect on Alex Salmond but have anonymity. It included the message from Redacted to the effect that she did not want to attend any further meetings regarding a possible complaint if Redacted were going to be present, as Redacted made her feel pressured rather than supported.
So they say Redacted here because they've basically covered up who the accuser is. So the person who may be falsely accused Alex Salmond's identity has been protected.
Included the message from Ian McCann to the effect that he would sit on Redacted's complaint until it became necessary to deploy it. It included a number of messages from Redacted which gave the impression she was playing a central role in orchestrating and organising complainers, but I do not recall.
Well, we need to find out, it's in the public interest to find out who Redacted was and what her role is and if she should be up in charges.
Any specific details of those particular individual messages. Even more crucially, this account was consistent with what actually happened at the trial. In common with many observers, I was unimpressed by the performance of Alex Prentice for the prosecution and the truly pathetic and hopeless nature of a number of allegations. The inclusion of a daft allegation like the hair-pinging incident or the easily disproved hand on the knee in the car are universally agreed to have weakened rather than strengthened the prosecution's case when there were much more serious incidents admitted to have some basis in truth. He goes on, the only way I could make sense of the Crown's approach was in the light of what had been explained to me months earlier, the idea that the jury might settle on a lesser charge as a form of compromise, something we just read through a moment ago. So here again, as in other ways, subsequent events are entirely consistent with what I was told in June 2019, and I am confirmed in my belief of corrupt collusion between the Crown Office and Nicola Sturgeon's office. Just fucking wow yet again. Pressuring the police to tell them what they need to convict Alex Salmond is pretty incredible, as is sitting on the complaint until the right time to use it. Pretty sure that would say to anyone this is obviously a blatant political hit job. Something you would usually do to another party's MP, not someone in your own group. I guess it is a dog-eat-dog world in the SNP where you are always fair game as much as Boris Johnson or Keir Starmer would be. It is incredible shit, like I said though, to put so much effort into eating your own. It says to me the SNP are the type of people who shit where they eat. Literally, this whole thing is an absolute clusterfuck of corruption possibly coming from the top down in Scotland, if of course any of it is true, which it appears to be. In November 2019, I was told by a senior contact within the SNP, who I have known for many years, not the same source as Junie says, that a deal had been struck between Peter Murrell, redacted and redacted, whereby redacted would make an allegation of attempted rape against Alex Salmond, and Murrell would redacted return to frontline politics redacted. So a lot of that redacted there, but it seems Peter Murrell is involved in getting these rape allegations against Alex Salmond. That's not too fishy, is it? Craig Murray goes on though. The cold-bloodedness of this infuriated me. By around this time, I had learned of the identities of, I believe, all of the complainers. Not from a single source, but by asking around my contacts. It was not difficult. It would appear though Sturgeon's husband is implicated neck deep in all this bullshit. What a fucking surprise that ain't. He goes on, I realised that something extraordinary and morally disgusting was happening. If the public knew the identities of those being put up to make allegations and just how close to Nicola Sturgeon they were, they would immediately understand what was happening.
So are they lesbian feminists? That's what I would like to know. Are they part of her inner circle? Is her inner circle lesbian intersectional Marxists? Who are these people? We need to find out these now. This is now in the public interest. The anonymity needs to go, and we need to actually find out who these people are and what the connection is with Nicola Sturgeon.
Happening, but the convention protecting the identity.
What are the chances of a senior advisor taking the hit for this and Miss Sturgeon dodging the bullet? No, there's no chance of that happening. The senior advisors are mixed in. It's not, oh, this guy could be the fall guy. It's that disparate. There's that many people now implicated in it. There has to be individual investigations into everything. The prosecution, there has to be into the police, into the civil servants, into Nicola Sturgeon's core group, whoever this is, into the WhatsApp groups, into the complainers who may have to get charges. The whole thing has to be investigated. The scope of the parliamentary inquiry has to be widened. There has to be independent groups that actually investigate these people who are actually being involved in this. And there has to be criminal charges. These people have to be kicked out of office and kicked out of the civil servants.
Of those making allegations of sexual assault made such allegations the perfect vehicle for a positive campaign to frame unforced charges, while the perpetrators of this conspiracy to pervert the course of justice had the protection of the courts against exposure. I think they call that gaming the system, don't you? Extremely shitweasel behaviour, but it does not surprise me in the slightest. Obviously, if true, it does certainly mean that heads should fucking roll, though. He says here that accusers included redacted Nicola Sturgeon, First Minister of Scotland and leader of the SNP, redacted Ian Blackford, UK parliamentary leader for the SNP, redacted Angus Robertson, former UK parliamentary leader of the SNP.
So all these guys need to resign. Every one of them, Angus Robertson, Ian Blackford, they all have to go.
Redacted. Now, obviously, it's not them they're talking about. They must be involved in some way, but it's people to do with them. We obviously can't even speculate on who that is because it would be against the law and we'll end up in the same shit position.
So we need to now find out who the redacteds are and what is actually going on here.
This poor bastard's in now, who actually gave these statements to the court. He goes on, it would cause a massive political storm were it known to the public and raise major and in fact fully justified suspicions about motive. The combination of the anonymity of these accusers and the exclusion from the trial on the grounds of collateral evidence.
Is this why 5 senior SNP ministers are not standing in May elections? Well, that's part of it. They will be standing later on, but I don't know who's not standing. You need to give me a list of the 5 names to actually be able to tell you if it's related. But there may be some relation to this. But Nicola Sturgeon has to resign. She can't stand again in the next parliamentary election. It's not tenable for her to do that. They know what's coming and what want to stand down. They might be up in criminal charges. It's not even the fact that they stand down. They should be prosecuted. They need to be up in criminal charges. It's not even just standing down will be enough with all the pensions, etc. intact. Exactly. That's why they need to be up in criminal charges.
And continued intention of the Crown Office to suppress of the messages implicating Peter Murrell and Sue Riddick in the conspiracy has resulted in the denial to the Scottish public of information which there is the strongest possible public interest in knowing, in order for them to judge.
So that's a definite. We need to know who the redacteds are. We need to know the full scope of this, who's actually been involved. It's now in the public interest to know. It's not going to be acceptable for them to cover up, because the people who are covering up are the people who may be involved. So we need to know. The parliamentary committee needs to overturn any of the redacteds and find out who exactly is involved in this.
Judge the actions of those in power over them. Well, I've got to say, it's really not looking good for the SNP, Sturgeon, or anyone involved in this clusterfuck. The levels of corruption being talked about here is telling tin pot African nations run by dictators to hold their fucking beer. I knew the SNP likely did some suspect shit, as do all political parties, but fuck my old boots. This is juicy, like a wet fanny, guys, let me tell you that. Now, after all that, we actually have some details on the corrupt media, so let's check that out. Craig Murray said on the 21st of November 2019, the Crown released substantial details.
So just think of this. So all of these people can be making false allegations about Alex Salmond. All of their details is protected, even though they could well be false allegations. And the media are then able to swoop on Alex Salmond from these false allegations and basically smear him to the country and smear him in the press.
Details of the charges against Alex Salmond on 22nd of November.
Then it's hard enough to get the media then to be held accountable in a court. So there needs to be changes to that as well, where if the media are making false allegations or incorrect allegations, it must be much easier for them to be held accountable.
Remember, I looked through the newspapers, and every Scottish newspaper had massive front page coverage of the accusations against him in detail. The front page headline of the Herald read 10 women, 14 sexual offences, Alex Salmond accused. The details of all charges were printed.
So that's 10 women. I think one woman stopped or rescinded or didn't go through, and the other 13 sexual allegations. And it just seems that I knew it was absolutely ridiculous. I knew it was a set-up from that point of view just from the start.
On the front page, which had no other content, there were 2 other full pages of it inside. He then goes on to list a few other newspapers who also did the same. I won't read them out, but we'll put them on screen for you to see the article headlines he is talking about.
So the Daily Record front page had Salmond trial, the charge, 1 attempted rape, 1 intent to rape. I don't know how they figure that out. 2 indecent assaults, 10 sexual assaults in the dock, 10 women accused former First Minister of attacks. There are 2 further full pages inside. So they were just throwing absolute muck at them. The Scottish Sun, Salmond rape bid. My goodness, that's a horrendous. At Butte House, ex-First Minister sex rap, 10 fake allegations, 14 charges, pinned a victim down. And no other story on the front page. The Daily Express, Salmond made naked rape bid. Full details of 14 charges revealed. Claims involve 10 women over 6 years. I'm innocent, says ex-First Minister, and no other story on the front page.
Here. He also said, though, it wasn't just the newspapers. He said broadcast media took the same tone. I was deeply concerned.
Kirsty Ward was sitting there like a vulture.
By the entire tenor of the press coverage, which appeared to be highly hostile towards Salmond and present matters in a way that would be bound to influence potential jurors against him. I was also surprised by the sheer detail in the charges which the Crown Office has presented to the media. This worried me because it creates a huge imbalance in media coverage and thus in public opinion. The Crown can release salacious details about attempted rape while lying naked on top of somebody in bed, and the media can echo this to the heavens. But from that moment, nobody can publish anything to contradict the Crown without being in contempt.
Yeah, that's not acceptable. That's a complete imbalance in the way that this is happening and can't be allowed to continue.
of court. It seemed to me that in these circumstances the Crown ought to have been a great deal more restrained in the amount of salacious detail it was making available. Certainly there was nothing in what was happening which would contradict the information I had been given of the Crown Office being party to a political plot to destroy Salmond. Once again he is implicating the Crown Office in this little scheme to destroy one of their own, or to destroy one of the SNP's own anyway. Incredible shit. And obviously the scumbag vulture media was all too quick to jump on it like a bitch on heat. He goes on, as with other information recounted above, it is remarkable how precisely events as they have unfolded have proven my sources were right. It is now notorious in Scottish political circles that the National Executive of the SNP last week adopted measures which effectively redacted, and did so in order to redact it.
Yeah, the inquiry, the governmental, parliamentary inquiry needs to unredact these things, and we have to find out who has actually, who said what when. Politically, what can the PM and the government do about this? I think it's more internally with the Scottish judicial system. I think there has to be more light shone in it, and they seem to be a wee bit flippant. I'm a big fan of Mogg as well. I think he's a very intelligent guy, but they seem to be a bit flippant about Scotland, not actually going into the detail. You have to bring up detail and actually say what is required to be done. They're sort of just having a sort of overview, and they can bring up things in Westminster with regards to what is required to be done, and that's important. What to make it fair, they should be doing it from that tack. If I was in a Conservative MP.
Many articles have appeared in the media to that effect. I regret that redacted identity is still being protected.
Yeah,
now, I'm not really...
That has to stop. The redacted identity, because it looks like an orchestrated attempt to destroy Alex Salmond, all the redactions need to be lifted.
Sure what all that could mean due to the amount of redactions in it, but hopefully we won't have to wait too long to find out. The fact that so much in it is redacted suggests to me it is not good for the SNP in my book. I could obviously be wrong since we don't know what the fuck is going on with that. There's so much redacted you can't even take anything of it. I thought it was important to read out because it's all being covered up. Now we get to some more on the Salmond trial and the BBC's documentary on it. He said, as already noted, the Crown had given the media, and the media had extravagantly published salacious details about the prosecution charges from long before the trial. When the prosecution evidence was led, there was again, for the first few days, an absolute frenzy, a front-page news bulletin leading reporting, again focused exclusively on the most salacious and sensational extracts from what the accusers had said in court. He goes on, then, when the defence witnesses stood up one after another without the benefit of anonymity and gave their evidence under oath, there was virtually nothing. I witnessed the ranks of the media in the front of the public gallery literally shut their notebooks. Virtually no media reporting appeared of the fact that Redacted could not have had her alleged morning exchange with Tasmina Ahmed Sheikh because the latter's father had died that morning, nor of the two separate eyewitnesses feet away who testified that Redacted was not grown.
Well, that sounds like perjury. If that couldn't have been done, so not only perverting the course of justice, perjury as well. So that individual, whoever is redacted, has to be up on both perverting the course of justice and potentially abusing their position in government as well. So that individual, whoever that civil servant, will have to resign.
At the Stirling Castle photo call, no account was given of Janet Watt, line manager, denying she had been told of incidents as she claimed, nor of Alex Bell, who detests Alex Salmond, nevertheless testifying that he did not see the claimed by the scene Jack Lorenzo painting. I could go on and on with all the defence evidence which the media did not mention. So there we have media obviously being extremely complicit in this, as they were with all things these days north and south of the border. The frenzy around Alex Salmond's case was massive.
I think we need to find out who's actually controlling the media. We have to have a breakdown of the control and who's controlling the British media, breakdown of the shareholders, who the actual underlying shareholders are. We have to find out who's actually controlling our media.
I remember actually covering it myself at the time, maybe once or twice. I did not follow up in detail because the defence case got ignored. Thinking back to it now, it explains why I wondered how I struggled to find anything worth covering in relation to his defence. Now I know why, or at least a possible reason why. The fact that he is saying this in court, though, suggests he would be telling the truth or risking serious shit. Either way, it's not looking good for the media's credibility at this point. Actually, they have no credibility, so it's a normal day for them, I guess. He continues here on the media complicity and special treatment. The general media situation is perfectly exampled in the subsequent BBC documentary, The Trial of Alex Salmond, broadcast by the BBC on the 17th and 18th of October and fronted by Kirsty Ward.
I think Alex Salmond was going to actually sue this, as far as I was aware, and he was going to take them to court, which he should definitely do.
While purporting to be a day-by-day account of the trial and adopting a day 1, day 2, etc. format, incredibly, the documentary simply skipped from day 7 to day 10 and missed out the defence witnesses. That is just what the overwhelming majority of the media did, quite deliberately.
It doesn't look like a complete setup in the media with some sort of complicity there as well.
Of course, there can be no serious argument against the proposition that the Scottish mainstream media is overwhelmingly hostile to Alex Salmond. It is a simple statement of fact that the only reason any measurable section of the Scottish population...
It doesn't matter to be hostile to somebody, they should still have the right to have a fair trial and get it reported accurately. I think the journalists have got to start looking at themselves and find out what they're actually doing, what sort of job they're providing.
...has the slightest idea of what the defence evidence was is that it was published on my blog. Otherwise, they would have the false mainstream media presentation of highly selective quotes from Gordon Jackson to the effect that Salmond could have been a better man, but inappropriate does not mean criminal, and the deliberately created false impression that the jury was faced with only he said, she said decisions. The third-party eyewitnesses who challenged key aspects of accused evidence went mostly unreported, except for by him.
These people who have redacted or basically had a counter argument to the actual complainers have to be used in the perjury trials against the complainers or perverting the course of justice trials.
There you have it, guys, the BBC ignoring defence evidence in their own documentary that should actually have them done for contempt of court.
I would sue them, Alex. If I was Alex Salmond, I would definitely sue them.
Craig Murray is being done for it, and they released more information than he did in their biased documentary. What a surprise the BBC production is not impartial, I'm sure you would all agree. We have noted their love for Nicola Sturgeon over the years, so all of this rings true to me in relation to them. Now let's get into the campaign after the Salmond case had ended, and once again it's including Nicola Sturgeon's husband among many others very close to her. Craig Murray says, unfortunately, Alex Salmond's declaration of a COVID truce on proceedings was not matched by the conspirators. They immediately began a concerted campaign to undermine the verdict in public opinion and to attack the...
So the conspirators are now trying to use the press to continue the lies, even though he was not found guilty of anything. Very dirty tactics. Very dirty people, dirty tactics.
Reputation of the court and the jury. The campaign was fronted by Rape Crisis Scotland, an almost entirely Scottish government-funded organisation whose...
Well, I would suggest that that's a political organisation then, if it's funded by the government.
Funding is under the control of officials whose management line redacted, whose story of...
Oh, I see. So the person who redacted, whoever this civil servant is the manager of the money that goes to Rape Crisis Scotland. And they've been making false allegations against a former First Minister, allegedly, in an orchestrated attempt. Yet they're the ones that fund Rape Crisis Scotland. Oh, come on.
The knee grab on the very short ride from pizza...
Touching somebody's knee is not in a sexual assault. You have to touch somebody in an intimate area to make it a sexual assault. A knee, a foot, a hair is not sexual assault.
Express Holyrood to Waverley Station has been comprehensively debunked at trial. So more redacted, but implicating now Rape Crisis Scotland.
So that redacted, whoever that redacted is there, she looks like she or he is part of the conspiratorial overview. They were also trying to, I don't know if Bert's about to come on to this, but they were also trying to just allow the judge to make the decision on rape trials, not like a jury.
MP or Scottish government.
And the majority of the Alex Salmond jury were women. So the women saw right through this, which is credit to them. The majority of the Alex Salmond trial jury was women.
funded organisation that appears to have either involved itself or been dragged into this complete shit show. Not a good look for them, but I wonder what the redacted parts say. What we can take from that is it suggests a massive conflict of interest outside of their shady behaviour he is accusing them of here. You know what, I think North Korea could be less corrupt than Scotland if any of this is true. He goes on, the 9 complainers in the case signed...
Why are the media out for Salmon? Has Sturgeon got that much influence? Sturgeon's a globalist shill. She's just a shill for the globalists. She's not a nationalist. She's not done anything to advance nationalists. She's not even managed the Scottish economy, managed Scottish social issues very well. She's been a disaster, but she's just a shill for the globalists. And the media because the media are controlled by a few people. It's not a lot of people that control the media. It's not an open media. She's basically a shill for the globalists. She's doing exactly what Boris Johnson is doing down in London. She's basically imitating exactly what Boris has done. It's almost as if she's a closet Tory. Now she's waffling on about rights for trans people now. I'll come on to the trans issue later on.
And a joint letter maintaining their accusations against Salmond, which he says was carried at saturation levels by the entire Scottish media, and was curious given that the complainers were purported by the Crown to be unconnected to one another. In a whole series of interviews across all of Scottish media, Rape Crisis Scotland argued in effect that the verdict had been perverse, an example of the justice system failing abused women, and was...
So the governmental supported Rape Crisis group is now saying, and who might have been part of one of the chain of command, might have been part of the orchestration attempt, sided with the people who were orchestrating it to attack Alex Salmond after he was found not guilty, because this might have been orchestrated, and the Rape Crisis Scotland have become completely illegitimate now.
Even used by Rape Crisis Scotland to argue directly for the abolition of jury trials in sexual assault cases.
So there you hear, trying to now destroy the jury trial and just have a judge dictate. And we've already seen the corruption in the judiciary. The Lord Advocate may have to resign.
People who apparently did not know each other before signed a letter together condemning the court and doubling down on the accusations, with Rape Crisis Scotland actually asking for the abolition of jury trials. What the actual fuck is going on up there? Well, actually we know. They want it so they can convict who they want, using some political motivations and a friendly judge or two.
Brilliant analysis, Bert. That's exactly what they want.
Like I just said, North Korea would be proud of Kim Jong-Sturgeon and her merry band of corrupt cunts here. Now let's get on to the final bit of media complicitly in this here, along with some shitweasels in the Crown Office or SNP feeding them information. Shit, it could have even been both. On the 23rd of April 2020, 2 policemen came to my door and left on the doorstep a letter, which I opened a day later. It was from the Crown Office telling me that I was charged with contempt of court.
There'll be no proof of the contempt of court. But what this is to try and intimidate and silence people who are basically bringing light onto these charges and what happened to Alex Salmond. And it's now all out the back. It's all coming out. And Nicola Sturgeon will have to resign, so will her husband. So a lot of other people are going to have to resign as well and face criminal charges.
Remarkably, within minutes of the police arriving, I received an email from Kieran Andrews of the Times newspaper stating that the Crown Office has confirmed that it has started contempt of court proceedings.
That's very fast that the Times knew about that as well. Kieran Andrews of the Times knew about that. That's almost as like there's the police, the media, and the government and the Crown Office all working in conjunction.
Against you in relation to the Alex Salmond trial. Would you like to comment? We are not children, he said. This is plainly a polite lie. Mr. Andrews had not telephoned the Crown Office that day and asked, I say, did you happen to charge Craig Murray with anything today? What had happened was that the Crown Office, in keeping with its highly politicised and corrupt behaviour through all of the events which I have here recounted, had phoned
the Lord Advocate is going to have to resign.
Reliably anti-Salmond journalist and tipped him off
about...
The
Lord Advocate James Wolfe also held back documentation, legal documents from the Parliament as well. When the Parliament asked, the Parliament has now had to take unprecedented steps to actually get the documentation from Lord Advocate Justice Wolfe, Lord Advocate James Wolfe.
about the charges against me. I believe that the Crown Office is deeply corrupt. Well, yeah, if what you say has any truth to it, which I think it might...
There maybe have to be a few resigning in the Crown Office.
Well, I would say they are all a corrupt bunch of cunts. I'm sure most of you would agree. Now, as you will all know, I am no fan of Alex Salmond himself, let me tell you that. But fuck me, this is some dog move by the SNP, media, and everyone involved in this conspiracy, because that's what it is, of course, if this is true. If you ask me, everyone involved should be sacked instantly. I find it amazing that all of this is coming out, though, like I've said. Alex Salmond, it would seem, has decided, you know what, they tried to fuck me, so I'm going to go scorched earth policy and bring down the corrupt disease shit show that is Scottish politics. Let's hope it actually works. But I tell you what, the revelations in this are pretty fucking amazing, and if true, like I've said, people's heads should fucking certainly roll. If any of us have been implicated even partially in doing any of this shit, the old...
Why are the media out for Salmon? Has Sturgeon got that much influence? Yeah, I think covered that.
Bill would be round the door trying to arrest us, but obviously these politicians and people in power can do what they want. Rules for thee, but not for me. Now, part of me is sitting here thinking there is more information to come out. Well, obviously, a lot has been redacted, so there most certainly is. But who knows how bad it's gonna get, and let's hope it is enough, like we said the other day, to bring down Fish Lip Sturgeon. Shit, at this point, it should well bring down the entire SNP.
There is a pattern consistent throughout history of oppressed people turning on the oppressors. Slaves are...
Oh, come on, do not try to make all women to blame. I don't think, Rachel, all women are to blame. I believe that some women do get sexually assaulted. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying to you is that we need polygraph tests for the accuser and the accused, and we need to then use the polygraph test in court to find out who is telling the truth and who is lying. If the person is lying, then the person needs to go to jail. You can't just say that all women tell the truth. In this case, it looks like it's orchestrated through multiple women. But no, I don't think. I think the more women are assaulted than they're not. But yes, it is not about feminism or lesbianism. It's about the corruption and power struggles. Yes, it is for the second part of that. But feminism and lesbian feminism, I'm talking about like I'm not talking about all feminists. I'm talking about subsect of the intersectional lesbian feminists who are men-hating, anti-men. I'm not talking about all feminists or all lesbians. This is two subsets of two groups that seem to marry in. Some of these are feminists, men-hating, misandrous are heterosexual as well. So they're not. It's not just lesbians. So I don't want to just lump in the lesbians and the feminists. There's some very nice lesbian women. There's some very nice feminist women as well who are more moderate. But there is an under element of man-hating and misandry, and they seem to think that the allowing men to be set up with false sexual allegations is not a criminal offence, and there has to be moves towards a more equitable distribution to find out if some man has been affected from false allegations, they need to be compensated. It's not accepted, just the same way as a woman should be compensated if they're affected from false sexual allegations. But in this instance that I'm talking about is about this issue, and this is the orchestration of this issue, which you're quite right does come down to corruption and power struggles
against their own
by the use of sexual allegations.
The peasantry against the feudal barons, colonies, Mr. Verhofstadt, against their empires, and that is why Britain is leaving. And it doesn't matter which language you use, we are going, and we are glad to be going. We're off.
So brilliant by Bert, absolutely fantastic by Bert. What I'm going to do is take a wee break just now. And later on,
differentiated with their children as the
brilliant Jordan Peterson. That I'm going to come back a wee bit later on, maybe about 4 o'clock, and I'm going to go through Craig Murray's, this gentleman here, Craig Murray, sworn evidence on the Sturgeon affair, and we're going to go over that line by line by line, and we'll get into the minutiae of what has been said by Mr. Murray, and also what is his situation being charged as well. So I'll give a shout out if anybody wants to give Mr. Murray My contact details, guerillatvchannel@gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to have a chat with Mr. Murray on the Guerilla TV channel. Guys, love my baby gorillas. Hope you found that interesting. You know that I do my best to bring you the gossip, and I got it correct long before anybody else.